Welcome, artists, to our Saturday afternoon painting workshop. My name is Paige. I'm the owner of Smudge Art Studio, and I will be narrating with you for our Fantastic Flamingo painting. Super excited to be here with you. Before we do get started, you'll want to grab your acrylic paint, your canvas, a jar of water, as well as some paper towel and your brushes. I generally get 3 different sizes of brushes, like a small, medium, and large, just to fill in certain areas. So I am working on a 12 by 24 canvas here, and you can see I do have it outlined. So I just did a circle for the body and a curvy line for the neck and kind of an oval for the head, and we'll paint the beak and such in later. On my palette, I do have the primary colors, so red or yellow, blue, and then some white and some black, because we're going to need those colors throughout. So the first thing that we're going to start with is our background. Now, you will want to decide what color you want your background to be. Mine is going to be blue. So if you've painted with me before, you know that I like to get a little bit messy. So we're actually going to double dip. I'm going to dip into my white and dip into my blue. I'm going to take my biggest brush that I have, because this is a big area, and I'm going to turn my brush on its side and outline my flamingo. I'm just going to give my flamingo a little bit of a buffer because I'm going to get a little bit messy in my background here, and I just don't want the chance of getting that paint inside my flamingo. So you'll want to just kind of go around your flamingo's body, and then you might have to dip again. I just double dip. I don't even mix the paint on my canvas. And I'm just going to outline around my flamingo's head and the neck. And you just want to give it a little bit of a buffer. So you might have to dip again. This time I'm just going to start on the head, and then I'm going to take that line around the bottom of the flamingo's chin and around the front of my flamingo's neck. Now, I did outline my flamingo's beak. You don't have to if you don't want to. I kind of, again, just like to have that buffer because I'm going to get a little bit messy when I go to do my background. Now, my background is going to be blue. Again, you can have your background any color you want it to be. And while I was painting this, I actually realized that I liked to have vertical strokes. So when I paint this, you'll see that I don't actually go ahead and do vertical strokes. But if I do vertical strokes, it kind of looks like a waterfall in the background. So I have, again, just double dipped. You can see I'm just kind of drawing in a horizon line there for my water. And I just fill in my background. So I've started in my bottom left corner. However, if you want to create that waterfall look, you're going to double dip. You're going to get some white on your brush and some blue on your brush, and you are just going to do vertical strokes up and down, and you'll see me do it here in a little bit. And it just creates a really pretty waterfall type of background. So really, artists, when we paint a background, we're not even worrying too much about how it looks or how perfect it is. Really, it's not the center of our masterpiece. Our flamingo is. So here are my vertical strokes if you want to see what they look like. And again, I really liked them. I kind of wish I had started off that way, because then I would have had this really pretty waterfall behind my flamingo. So next time I do the flamingo, that's what I will do. However, I'd already started the bottom left corner, so I'm just going to continue with that technique throughout the rest of my background. So again, you always want to make sure that you have a lot of paint on your brush. Do spread it out because, of course, we want the paint to dry. And we're just filling in our background. So I'll let you guys work on that. As we go through the video, there will be some breaks where it will fade to white. Those are breaks that we took when we were painting this live so that artists could complete that step. So if you ever find that you've hit a point where it fades to white, we're usually going to go on to the next step right away. So just pause your video and finish the step that you're working on. So again, I am just filling in my background, not even worrying about what it looks like. Honestly, artists, it's messy. That's how I paint. So again, just dipping in my blue and my white, and just, I do kind of, I guess, X sort of shapes, not even. I just go in every direction, really. I like the texture that it gives to the background. I like that it's not all smooth and perfect. I don't think paintings should be perfect. I think they should be full of emotion and movement. So again, if you do want to keep with that waterfall look, you're going to keep with those horizontal strokes. But I mean, that's a really neat thing. You could do swirly strokes and create kind of, maybe there's a storm going on in your background. That's what I love about painting, is it just creates so much emotion just by a simple brushstroke. So we're almost finished the background here. After we're done the background, we are going to move on to our water. So just keep that in mind. And when we move on to the water, we're not even going to have to clean our brush, because we are going to use blue and white again, and we're actually going to add a little bit of yellow. So this is when we get to the water. We're not even going to clean our brush. The only time you have to rinse your brush is when you are changing colors. When you do rinse your brush, you want to make sure that you wipe out the paint first. We are using acrylic paint. You do not want this paint to go down your drain. So again, just filling in the background, continuing that motion until my entire background is filled in. So artists, when we're done our background, our next step is to fill in our water. So again, I have white on my brush, I have blue on my brush already from the background. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to that to create a really pretty teal. And you'll want to play with that a little bit to get whatever color you like. And I'm going to use my big brush, and I turn it on its side so that I can get a really nice thin line. I just feel like I have a little bit more control that way. And then turning the brush on its face, we're going to fill in our water. Now, eventually, the paint is going to run off of your brush. Like, you need to dip often. It's not like using a marker or a pen where the color is automatically there. You're going to need to dip. So anytime that you are doing this and your brush starts to stick or sound scratchy or anything like that, you are going to want to dip into your paint again. Your brush should always glide. Now, artists, we're not going to get rid of our teal or turquoise or whatever color we made for the water completely, because in a little bit we're going to come back to it and either make it darker or lighter to add a ripple or a shadow underneath of our flamingo. So I'm just filling in some more of our flamingo's water here, just making sure it's all filled in, that I can't see any of that white canvas underneath. Now another thing you can do while you're sitting and waiting is paint the sides of your canvas. Now I didn't do that in actually either of my flamingo masterpieces. However, if you are going to hang it on your wall, it looks a lot nicer if your sides are painted. So you may just want to consider that and take either the blue or the turquoise, the teal, around the side of your canvas, the top, the bottom, as long as it's not sitting on anything, because you don't want your canvas to stick to the easel. So you can just paint the sides if you want to. So artists, if you haven't finished your background or your water, you are going to want to just pause right there. and finish that up, because our next step is going to be to create the main color of our flamingo's neck and head. So this time when I did my flamingo, I made him a little bit more orange than the original. It's entirely up to you. To make my coral, I actually took some, it was actually a phthalo red, which is kind of like a pink, and some yellow and some white, and that created a really pretty coral sort of color. But this is where you will want to decide what the main color of your flamingo's head and neck are going to be. The body we are going to paint in afterwards. You will want to make enough of this main color to do 2 coats. However, we're just going to start with 1 coat for right now. So again, I mixed some yellow and some pink and created a really pretty coral sort of color, and then I added some white in just to soften it a little bit. Now, using my medium brush, I don't want to use my big brush because it's not a very big space that I'm painting in here. So this is like cutting in a wall. Anytime you do the edging, you just want to be very careful with your brush. The harder that you press with your brush, the wider that your bristles spread. So you will want to kind of take a little bit of a deep breath, because I tend to do this very carefully. And you are just going to outline around your flamingo first. Or maybe I should say inline instead of outline. We just want to, again, give it a little bit of a buffer. This is where the precision comes in before we go ahead and fill it in. So we always want to paint on the outsides first and then paint inside of that shape that we are creating. Now I'm not going to outline, of course, my beak. My beak is going to be white and black, but I do want to outline around the top of it, where the eye part is going to be actually. And using that beautiful coral color I've just made, I'm just going to fill in my flamingo. Now, I'm not going to worry about the body just yet. It is the head and the neck, and really this is just our very first coat. So don't worry too much about how perfect it is. And you can see all my other colors there on my palette. When we get to do the flamingo's body, we're actually going to create different types of pinks and oranges and corals and whites, and we're going to make that our body. However, we do want to have a main color for our flamingo's neck and head, one that we're always going to kind of go back to. So again, I'm just using my medium brush and I am filling in my flamingo's neck and head. This is just the first coat, so we don't need to worry too much about how pretty it looks. Like it's not going to be great, artists. The second coat is what makes it. So I'll let you finish that up. So artists, while you finish that up, our next step is actually going to be to add the shadow underneath our flamingo, or the ripple, whichever you want to call it. So you will need to wipe, rinse, and wipe your brush really, really well, because we don't want to have any of that pink or flamingo color in our brush. So once you've done that, you are going to, again, still use your medium brush, and we're going to make that teal that we originally used for the water, we're going to make it darker or lighter. It really doesn't matter which way you want to go. I went a little bit darker, which means I added a little bit more blue in there. That's how you make a darker teal. And I've taken my medium brush and I'm going to create an ellipse or an oval right underneath of my flamingo's body. So again, I've used my brush on its side and I just create an oval or a flamingo kind of around where the bottom of my leg is going to be, or where it's going to hit the water. And I want to try and make that oval or ellipse as wide as my flamingo is-ish. Doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about it too much. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can dip into your white. You don't even have to really worry about cleaning your brush, but just dip directly into your white and add some strokes, some white strokes, just around that oval, kind of a little bit of a sketch. It makes it look like there's just a little ripple in there. You don't have to do that. It just adds a little bit of movement to your water. So again, I've just taken some white and I've just kind of lightly sketched around my flamingos, the shadow or the ripple that's underneath the flamingo. Again, it just gives your water a little bit of movement. So I've just dipped directly into my white and sketched those parts in underneath my flamingo. Now I am going to want to wipe, rinse, and wipe my brush really, really well because after this we are moving on to our flamingo's body. Now this is where we use our different corals and pinks and things like that. You could also go and use your big brush if you want to. It all depends on what kind of feathers you want your flamingo to have. However, I am going to use my medium brush, and I'm going to use my medium brush on its face because I do like those wider strokes. If you use the brush on its side, you get more of a tip when you use your um, brush stroke when you create your feather. So it's entirely up to you, artists, you decide. So I'm creating a peach coral color. I do this throughout the rest of the body. So I'm just making a little bit more of a coral or an orange, and I've just got a little tiny pile going on there. Throughout, you are going to make different oranges or different pinks, but just simply by adding some red or some pink, some yellow, some white, and you're just going to mix it up a little bit. So I've got that color on my medium brush, and again, I do like to use my medium brush for this. It's entirely up to you how you want your brush strokes to look. So artists, you can see if I use my brush on its side compared to when I use it on its face, I get an entirely different look from my flamingo. So you decide what kind of stroke you want to have throughout your flamingo. I like to use the short strokes throughout and around my flamingo's body, and you'll notice that all of my brush strokes go from the middle of my flamingo out, kind of like a clock, but not quite in such a perfect pattern. We can get lost in the thought process of this, and I really don't want you to get lost in the thought process of this. I just want you to lay down your paint. So you can probably get away with three or four swipes before you are adding more paint to your brush. And so you're literally just dipping and swiping, and all of your strokes, whether it's on the side of your brush or the face of your brush, are going to go from the middle out. So down, up, to the sides, whatever, but they're always going to come from the middle. The game here is to simply fill in your white space. And what I'm doing here is I'm just making a new tint of my coral. And the way I do that is I just add more white. Or if I want to go darker, I add more pink. Or if I want to go more red, I add more red. Or maybe I want it to be a little bit more orange, which means I'm going to add some more yellow. We want the body to be broken up a bit. We want to see each individual brush stroke and each individual feather that we as artists have created. So this is the process, artists. We are simply creating different corals, different pinks, different oranges, and filling in our flamingo's body. Now, we don't even need to fill in the whole thing, and I am going to speed it up here in a little bit. But I just want you to continue to add your feathers to your flamingo's body. Remember to break it up a little bit. Make some of those swipes more pink, some more white maybe, some more orange. It's entirely up to you, artists, but just spend the next little time filling in your flamingo's body. So artists, our next step after this is going to be to work on our flamingo's leg. Don't worry if you haven't filled in the rest of your body. We are going to come back to that. So we're going to do a thin line for the leg, we're going to do a second coat on the neck and the head, and we're going to do white on the beak. Not in that order, but we're going to start with the leg. So grab a thin brush, whatever your most thin brush is, after you're done playing with your body for a little bit. So I'm using my flathead brush, which when I use it on its side gives me a really nice thin line. I don't want to get too much black paint on my brush, so just a little bit of black paint, and you're going to just steady your hand. I like to rest my hand on the canvas, on the background when it's dry. So you're just going to steady your hand, take a deep breath in, and very slowly drag your brush from the top down to the bottom and give it a good stop right in the middle of that oval or ellipse that you previously made to reflect the ripple. So you can go over top of your leg and make it as thick as you want it to. The other thing that you're going to consider after you've filled in your leg is your flamingo's knee. The knee shape is simply a diamond. That's really all it is. The knee can go anywhere you want on your flamingo's leg. It really distinguishes how tall your flamingo is. I would put it at least an inch underneath your flamingo's body, if not a little more. It's entirely up to you. So add your finishing touches to your flamingo, and when you're done that, wipe, rinse, and wipe your brush really well because we are going to go on to use white. So I'm going to do the first coat of white on my flamingo's beak. So you want to grab, maybe your medium brush. Just make sure that the brush fits, and you also want to be able to do a point towards the bottom of the beak. However, you can add that point afterwards because we are going to use black for the pointed part of the beak. So if you just want to even just give the upper part of your beak a coat of white, we're going to come back to it later, but we just want to give the first coat a little bit of time to dry. So you want to grab your medium brush, and going back to that original coral that I had made for my flamingo's head and neck, you are going to use that to do your second coat on top of your flamingo's head and neck, keeping in mind that your paint may still be a little wet. So if you are painting over top of wet paint, you can do this. You just need to make sure that there's more wet paint on your brush than there is on your canvas. It's like a paint war. Whoever has the least amount of paint is going to take it away. So if you have lots of wet paint on your brush, it should be able to lay down on top of your flamingo's head and neck without any issues. If you land your brush and you are taking paint off, it too means that you need to have more paint on your brush. So dip into that coral and very carefully fill in your flamingo's neck and head, very gently adding a second coat. So I'm just going to speed things up a little bit here. You get the gist, though. We are simply adding a second coat of our flamingo color, whatever color we chose, onto our flamingo's neck and head. Be very careful about painting over top of wet paint. Just be very gentle, making sure you have more wet paint on your brush than you do on the canvas. This is our final coat on our flamingo's neck and head. We will come back in a little bit and add some highlights onto the head and onto the neck. However, we are just going to leave that now. Feel free to pause the video here if you need more time. But we're going to move on to our flamingo's body. This is our final coat on our flamingo's body. Now, if you look at mine, it looks a little similar. There's too much of the same color going on here, so I need to break that up a little bit. The best way to break colors up is to add a very contrasting color, and in this case we are simply going to use white. So if you just take pure white and start adding some white feathers into your flamingo, always taking your brush stroke from the center out, it will break up your color a little bit. See how much better that looks already? You can already see the difference between the flamingo's feathers. So we're going to continue this process, and this is going to be the final coat on our flamingo's body. Do break up your colors by adding more red, or maybe more yellow, maybe more white. We just want to make each color that we add on here a little bit different. I am going to speed things up here just so you can see what is coming up. However, feel free to pause the video and continue to work on your flamingo's body until it's done. A suggestion I have though is as soon as you like it, stop, because it will be inevitable that you will do something that you don't like. If you haven't finished your flamingo's body yet, feel free to pause the video here. However, we are going to go on to add our finishing touches to our flamingo. The first thing that we are going to do is we are going to add a second coat of white onto our flamingo's beak. Really, the white only needs to be in the upper half, I should say, of our flamingo. So you want to grab your medium brush, maybe even your smallest brush, but I like to use my medium brush for this one. And using just pure white on the tip of my brush, I am going to fill in the upper part for sure of my flamingo's beak. The bottom half of the beak will be filled in with black, so don't worry about that just yet. So here, let me show you. On the flamingo, if you want to take a look, on the bottom half of the flamingo beak, it is just a black V. We are going to do that later. Let's give a little bit of time for our flamingo's beak to dry, for that white that we just put on to dry. However, we are going to move on to add some highlights onto our flamingo's top of the head and where the flamingo's neck curves a little bit. I like to imagine where the light would be hitting the flamingo if there were sunlight shining on our bird. So using your smallest brush or your medium brush on its side, you are going to very carefully and very gently add some little short streaks or sketch type marks on the top of your flamingo's neck. Now I know that doesn't sound very specific. You could also use a lighter tint of your flamingo's main body color, but you just want to lighten it up a little bit, brighten it up a little bit where the light would be hitting our flamingo. So that would be on the top curve, on the front curve of the flamingo's neck, and on the very, very top of our flamingo's head. So artists, when you think you've added enough white, do stop, because there will be that one stroke that was just a little too much and you will be disappointed. So just do it as much as you think your flamingo needs and not a touch more. If you need some more time for that, feel free to pause the video here. However, our next step is to add some black onto the bottom of our flamingo's beak. Now this is on the point part and it's in the shape of a V. So I like to put a little dot in the middle of my flamingo's beak where I figure I want my V to meet. So taking the smallest brush that I have, I'm just going to plop a little dot right there just so I can guide myself. That is where I want my V to meet. And I'm going to give my flamingo's beak a little bit of an outline. This is where I can sharpen the tip up a little bit if I want to. You can also make it more curved. You can do whatever you want here. Because you're using black, it covers really, really well. So continuing to use your small brush, we are just going to use that small brush to fill in the bottom part of the flamingo's beak. Now remember, the top part is the shape of a V, so you want to do your brush strokes higher on the right side and higher on the left side, and then bring it down in the middle. That's also going to be where our flamingo's mouth is in the middle of that V. So just keep that in mind. This is the detail part, so it will take little tiny brush strokes, a little bit of time. And just fill that in. So as you're finishing up the bottom of your beak, the next part is going to be to do the flamingo's eye. Now the eye is a dot with a circle around it. I like to do my dots by using the hard end of a brush. So all I do is I take whatever size of brush that I like the handle of, I turn it around, I dip it right into my black, and I dot. That's all we're going to do. So we're going to turn our brush around, dip it in the black, and just give a little dot right where we want our flamingo's eye to be. Remember, the eye should be on the head part, so it's still on the white, so don't put it on the pink, it's on the white, but the dot needs to be, attached to the brain, which indicates that it does need to be on the flamingo's head. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your tiniest, smallest brush possible with the tiniest tip, and we are just going to do a very small line around our flamingo's eye. Now when we're doing things in detail like this, we need to just have the smallest amount of paint on the smallest brush. We're hardly going to press it all because the harder that we press, the wider that our bristles spread. And very carefully, we are simply going to draw a circle around our flamingo's eye. Now our last step is to take our smallest, most pointed brush that we have with a tiny bit of black on the tip, and we are simply going to draw in the line of our flamingo's mouth. So from the middle of that V part, we are simply going to take our brush and draw a line up for however long you want your mouth to be. I would say, at least starting to touch the head of where the head would be. Now artists, that is our final touch for our flamingo masterpiece. What you can do, if you would like to really finish off your canvas, is to take your large brush and paint the sides of your canvas. What you're going to do is you are going to use your large brush, dip it in your blue or your teal or whatever color you want your sides to be. Sometimes I even used to paint it in black. And pulling from the back to the front, you are just going to paint. You are not going to go up and down. If you go up and down, you have a chance of the bristles splitting and the paint going onto the front of the canvas that you have just spent the last hour creating. So as you're adding your finishing touches to your masterpiece, I just want to remind you to keep your brushes clean. So you're going to rinse your brushes in warm soapy water, get the water out of those bristles, shape them, and lay them flat to dry. Artists, thank you so much for spending your time with Smudge Art Studio. We love creating with you. Remember, we have so much coming up. In fact, our next workshop is just next Saturday, where we will be painting our beautiful tulips masterpiece. After that, we will be painting our Spanish guitar. You can find all we have coming up at smudgeart.ca.